I'm Gabby Skilling.
I'm Katie Stackwitz.
Our presentation is going to be on fundraising and sponsors.
So just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. We have this sort of 6-step process that you can see up here, going from budgeting to planning and searching, reaching out, confirming, reaffirming, and then repeating the entire thing. We're also going to discuss some smaller scale fundraising methods and so just some tips and tricks that we've learned over the years. Just a sort of heads up, we're going to be focusing mostly on raising money from larger sponsors or grants rather than doing smaller scale fundraising methods, just because we found that there's a lot of work that goes into some of these smaller fundraising methods and you get maybe a little bit less bang for your buck. So we think that going for some of those larger ticket sponsorships, while they can take a lot of work, are ultimately a lot more rewarding. Also, sort of word of caution, this is sort of what has worked for our team and our team's context. So take whatever we say with a bit of a grain of salt. Everything that we say works for us. You know best your own team situation and what will work for you. So the first step of fundraising is always to start out with having a budget. So we sort of break it out into our income, our expected income, and our expected expenses. We base this primarily on what we've spent in past years, and then anything that we know is going to be coming up in the future. For example, if we need to build new field elements every year. You need to build a new rocket, a new hab level, whatever the game requires. So you know that you're going to need a certain number of 2x4s for building those robot parts or for building those field elements. But you might not know exactly what's going on your robot, but you can estimate, okay, last year we spent about $1,500 on our robot. Most of that's going to be about the same. We're using the same drive base. We're going to be using most of the same motors. So we're going to be budgeting about that same amount again for the expenses category. For the income, look at your possible sponsors, sponsor opportunities, grants. If your team is in a position where parents are able to donate to the program, definitely factor that in as well. Parents can be a really good source of contributions. And then any other smaller fundraisers, these can be some of the smaller scale fundraising methods that we talked about. If you have an outreach booth where somebody can donate to your team if they wish, that can be as sort of part of this other category. And then also sort of up at the top, including your carryover is important, just to sort of note what you left off the year with and how that's going to affect how much money you have. A really important thing that we always try to make sure to do is to assume the worst case scenario for both. So what that means for expenses is that you're going to assume that everything goes wrong, like you need to buy twice as many motors because they all failed. You didn't get into your first choice regional, so now you have to travel and you have to pay for robot shipping, or even things that are good, like you got into championships when you weren't necessarily expecting to, but now you have to pay the registration fee and you need to come up with that $4,000 or $5,000 from somewhere. So budgeting for all of those expenses ahead of time and having a larger expense budget than you think you might need is sort of half of that critical process. The other half is shooting low on income. So assuming that nothing is guaranteed, assuming that maybe one of your biggest sponsors is going to go bankrupt, they cut their outreach budget and they can't donate to you anymore. Maybe if you were a rookie team or a second-year team, you're no longer able to apply for those first specific grants. You sort of need to factor all those things into your expected income. So shoot low on the income and shoot high on expenses. It's much better to do this and then end up with more money than you thought you would have than to not do this and to end up with not enough money at the end of the season to keep your team going. So once you've sort of got a rough draft of your budget, and it can be a working document. You can keep editing it. You want to start your planning and searching phase. So this is basically all about researching what type of sponsors are going to be right for your team. That could be your school district if they're able to sponsor you, any educational sponsors if there's a university or college in the area, if there are any industry sponsors such as engineering firms or companies, or just people who, maybe individual citizens who really appreciate, the educational opportunities that your team offers to high school students. Those are all potential sources of funding. Again, your team's circumstances best. So this is really where it gets pretty personal to teams. So once you sort of have an idea of your circumstances, what you're sort of thinking what the sort of sponsor that you're thinking will want to sponsor you. You're going to you want to have a big comprehensive document of, that sponsor, how much you're shooting, like the amount that you're shooting for that sponsor, any sponsor contact information, an address, any information about that sponsor should all be compiled into one big spreadsheet that anybody who needs to can visit and get back to that document if they need to, send out another email, if they need to contact somebody, if they need to recontact somebody, etc. So making sure that you have a lot of open communication with your team, especially between students and mentors, if both students and mentors are working on this fundraising side. And then also having a very comprehensive list of all of your possible sponsors is definitely really critical at this stage.
So reaching out. So once you have the comprehensive list of sponsors that Katie referred to in the last couple of slides, you want to proceed in contacting those sponsors. There are a couple of different ways you can contact your sponsors. The most two popular methods are going to be emailing and calling. We don't necessarily recommend calling because it can be difficult, especially if your sponsor may be out of the office. They could be on vacation. It could be after working hours. And you can't leave as much information in a voicemail as you could in an email. So it's going to be really vital, and it's going to be harder to get back into contact with those sponsors. So with an email, you can leave a lot more information for them. You can include documents or some type of attachment like a sponsor brochure or more information about your team. And it gives your sponsors more time to respond and to process your request. So that's going to be very vital. Along with that, when you are reaching out, it's important that a student is reaching out because this presents a student-driven team. The students are the ones that are working together, and they're the ones that are creating this robot. So it's very important that your students are the ones that are reaching out and requesting sponsorships because it will heavily impress your sponsors and it can leave a lasting impact on them. Another important thing, and this is also involved when you're making your list, is to include sponsors that you've contacted in past years and sponsors that have agreed to a partnership with you before. So if you do this, you're not necessarily starting from square one each year where you have to go to a company, reintroduce your team, introduce what you do, and all of these other aspects. When you're contacting a sponsor that you already know, it's a lot more familiar, and they're going to be more likely to sponsor you in future years, especially if you are updating them on your team. It's always helpful to have preset emails or a call script whenever you are contacting your sponsors. Emails can help, especially if they're pre-written, because they can help you save time, and then you have an automatic and uniform response when you are replying to your sponsors. And like I mentioned earlier, having a sponsor info packet attached or anything like that can also be very helpful because it can imply and include more information about your team, maybe about an educational program that you run that you wouldn't necessarily want to put in an email because you don't want your email to be an essay. You don't want it to be 15 paragraphs long because chances are your sponsor will not read that.
So an important part of this reaching out phase is to not get discouraged. There have been sponsors that I've emailed, 5 or 10 times before they finally responded. And, that response may be positive as in they're going to give me a sponsorship, or negative as in they're not able to sponsor me that year. But it's really important to keep reaching out until either you get a response or it's no longer appropriate for you to continue reaching out. If you've sent them 10 or 15 emails, once a week, and they still haven't responded, they probably aren't going to respond when you send them your 16th email. So that's the sort of point that you should cut it off once you've been reaching out for pretty consistently for a couple months. But getting discouraged at this sort of step 3 is the worst thing that you can do, because it's entirely possible that sponsor missed your first email, or they saw it, thought about it, and then forgot it, or that they're in the sort of discussion phase with, with the rest of whatever team they have to discuss sponsorship with, but that sort of petered out, and they just, that email reminds them, oh yeah, I want to get back on track with that. I really want to sort of push this through and get, get this FRC team sponsored. So, you don't necessarily know what's going on with your sponsor at that moment. So assume that, assume that they want to respond to you until it's very clear that they don't, either because they tell you or because you've emailed them or contacted them consistently and they haven't gotten back to you. So hopefully you're sort of at the point now where you've gotten some confirmations back from your sponsors, and they said, yes, we'd love to sponsor you. You've probably also gotten some back from sponsors that are not able to sponsor you. That's fine. Something that I sort of alluded to before, but I'm going to reiterate right now, is that it's when you're making your budget and when you're deciding in that sort of planning and searching phase, step 2, what you want, how many sponsors you want to go for, you should probably aim for about 2 to 3 times as much sponsorship as you think you're going to need. One, because of that, you never know when an extra expense is going to come up, but also because, probably the majority of sponsors will either not be able to sponsor you, they'll be able to sponsor you, but at a lower amount than you thought they were going to be able to sponsor you, or they just won't reply. So it's really important to, go for 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 times as much sponsorship as you think is going to be necessary for your team, just to have that sort of safety net, because things will not go 100% according to plan. So yeah. So you might think sort of at this confirming phase that, once your sponsor says, yeah, we'd love to sponsor you, here's our money, we love to see what your team is doing, you guys are doing great stuff, you're like, cool, my job is done, I'm out of here, I don't need to do anything else. And that is about the worst thing that you can think at this step. Just stopping when your sponsor confirms doesn't build a lasting partnership. So Gabby mentioned before this idea of retention, that you want to contact sponsors again, because if a sponsor sponsors you once, they're already familiar with your program. There's clearly a reason why they decided to sponsor you the first time, and they're probably going to want to do it again. So if you sort of drop the ball at this stage and just leave them on sort of confirmed and don't follow up, that can be pretty detrimental, not necessarily to that one season, but to future seasons when you reach out to them again and they think, oh yeah, like I vaguely remember this team, but I didn't hear anything from them after that. So this sort of leads into our next step, step 5, and how you want to continue reaching out to your sponsors.
Yes. So reaffirming is very vital for sponsor retention. So reaffirming would be maybe clearing up any type of details on a sponsor's logo. If you're providing them benefits, maybe you want to put their logo on the back of your shirt or on your website or even on your robot. In that case, you would want to clear up any details with that. Most importantly, reaffirming is providing your sponsor with the benefits that you guaranteed them when you set up that partnership. This is really important, especially because sponsor benefits can be very crucial to a sponsor retention program. The best type of benefits that you can have would be a type of benefit where your sponsor gets to directly see the impact that they are having on your team. So for us, we invite our sponsors to come to one of our regionals, and there they get to see our robot during a competition, and they really get to experience what a first competition is like, which can leave a lasting imprint on them. We also have a sponsor open house where they get to come to our shop and they get to see the machines that we are working for, and they realize that these are industrial level machines, and that can also be very important to a sponsor. So
hold on, we're going to, computer's messed up a little bit. Give us a second. There we go. Sorry about that.
So these are just two examples of sponsor benefits. They're on the back of our t-shirt, and then you can also include them in a newsletter, anything like that. Any chance where you can give your sponsors recognition is a great chance to give them recognition. I think this is really important in reaffirmation.
And I just want to sort of reiterate this idea of a newsletter that's up here. So having a newsletter, monthly, bi-monthly, maybe once a season, whatever works best for your team, can really, really help sponsors connect to what's going on with your team. Especially if we don't have them up here right now, but if you list your major sponsors on your newsletter, that can be a sort of recognition for them. That's like, oh, that's me. And, this is going out to not just your sponsors, but like your entire team, your alumni, maybe your community. So having this newsletter sort of keeps them informed in a way where you get to directly control the information that you're giving them. So step 6 is pretty much just restarting all of these that you've already done. So, step 1, budgeting, you maybe did over the summer before off season started. Reaffirming, you did throughout the build season, and maybe a little bit, after build and competition season ended into spring. But you want to continue sort of this cycle, throughout the year. So this isn't ever a process that necessarily stops. It's really something that you want to continue year long.
Yeah. So other than maintaining sponsorships, there are some other fundraising methods that you could use. One of them could be grants. That is a larger scale fundraising method. Up here we have smaller scale fundraising methods. So we do not recommend smaller scale fundraising methods as your primary way of getting funds for your team. Just because they can be unreliable from year to year. You don't know what might happen, and they typically don't provide you with a large amount of funds for the amount of effort that you are putting into them, which is going to be very vital. So some examples we have here would be something like a car wash that you could run. You could also set up some type of donation jar at an outreach event, or whenever you're presenting, maybe you have a community farmers market, or you have a table set up where you're just there to hand out flyers or give information about your team, and a donation jar there would be a way to get small funds. Another idea would be something like a bake sale or a raffle, any type of event you could hold that would also help you gain funds. Again, small scale fundraising methods are for small funds, and it's just because you're not going to get a large amount of money out of the effort that you were putting in. And I think this is very important to keep in mind, especially because when you're in first, you have a lot of other priorities going on, you have a lot of other responsibilities, and this won't necessarily always be the top thing on your list. So what we've learned is that raising large funds is possible. We just have to think about what effort we're putting in and how we're raising those funds. So a way like parent donations, sponsorships, or grants are all great ways to raise funds, especially because you have a high income and effort ratio. This would be really important. You want a higher income for lower effort, just because people can get very busy and it can become difficult to do smaller scale fundraising, anything like that. Community support is very important when it comes to fundraising and sponsors. It's great if you go to a sponsorship and a sponsor has already heard about the high school team or the robotics team that you are talking about. That can always go a long way. But more importantly than that, when you are giving your community support, when you are putting STEM in the community, when you are reaching out to them and you are supporting your community, it's going to give you a high profile in the community. So this means that you might have a larger following on social media platforms. You might get mentioned in an article more often. Anything to raise that profile in the community can be very key to sponsorships as well, because sponsorships might be able to hear about you, or they might be able to see something about you, or if they were to look you up or anything like that, they may be able to recognize, oh, this is what they have done in the past if you have not mentioned to them before. Parent support, always really important when it comes to fundraising. It's also just important in general for the team, but your parent support is key. And then always track your progress. So this is important going from year to year. And I'm sure Katie mentioned this in the budgeting section of the presentation. Have a spreadsheet, have a written list of your sponsors from previous years. Have information about how much money they gave in previous years, so you know how likely they might be to give that money again. have lists of past expenditures, past income, so you can predict next year's budget, and then you can be smart about how you're fundraising for your team.
So that's the end of our presentation. If you got this far, thank you so much for watching it all the way through. If you have any questions, you can scan this QR code that's on the screen, or you can send us an email at business@citruscircuits.org, or you can send us just a quick message through our website at citruscircuits.org. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please let us know if you have any questions or feedback.
Thank you.